study session for the City Council. This study session is to discuss the Littleton Police Department employee conversion to a Fire Police Pension Association known as FPPA. So City Manager Ralph will start off, and then we have presentations from Tiffany, our CFO, and anybody else? Chief Stevens?
Chief Stevens.
Okay, we'll go ahead and get started.
Thank you, Mayor. Actually, that was pretty much my introduction. So,
I thought you had more.
No, I think the staff communication kind of lays out an opportunity here that we want to discuss with the City Council here, where we're looking at a conversion of our retirement system here from ICMA here basically to FPPA. And I think we want to talk about the pros and cons of that and why now. Why are we discussing that with the council today? So with that, I'm going to let Chief Stevens maybe start off, and we have, I guess, some guests that I want to introduce here. They're sitting in the audience.
All right. Thank you, Council. Chief Doug Stevens, Chief of Police here in Littleton. Thanks for meeting with us tonight to talk about the possible transition for the sworn police officers to go to the FPPA pension plan, defined benefit plan. We've actually, to answer Mark's questions about why now, I'll start there. We've actually I became chief here in May of 2013, I think it was, May 20th. On May 21st, I had Corporal Al Quintana in my office shaking me. Hey, I'm Al Quintana, when are we going to the FPPA? And what can you do about that? And it's not that much of an exaggeration. The officers of the police department have been really interested since I got here on the possibility of transitioning to the Fire and Police Pension Association plan options. The difficulty we had from back then is the FPPA, and I have a couple folks here from the FPPA. Do you guys want to introduce yourselves real quick?
Sure. I'm Phil Boardman. I'm a field education representative.
I'm Chip Wiley. I'm the Chief Benefit Officer.
Thanks, guys. I asked them to be here just if you guys have any technical questions that I can't make an answer up on.
I'd be very disappointed.
But the FPPA had a moratorium on reentry for a number of years. It was recently lifted in December of 2016. I think it was lifted while they were working out some parts of the plan. So during that time, we were working behind the scenes to kind of prepare a pitch for the police department's sworn employees going to the FPPA plan, and we had done a lot of work. So when the moratorium lifted, we began to formalize that process a little more. We planned to come to you sooner with a request to make this transition, but the city was what I like to refer to in a state of flux at that time, with membership on the council, a membership on the pension board. We lost several members of the pension board, which is comprised of administrative staff and the city department heads, as well as 4 members from the police department. So we did a lot of work, but then a lot of that work and background work left to go to other organizations and things, so we kind of had to start over. Turns out, in my opinion, we're pretty lucky to have pushed it back a little bit, because now we get to talk with you folks, and I think that we have a good opportunity here to move forward on it. Ultimately, what this comes down to is in 2008, the fire department, Littleton Fire, went through this process to enter the FPPA pension plan. At that time, the police department decided not to join for some reason, and we can't really figure out what that is. There's no historical record of why they didn't. My best guess is that the fire department, being firefighters, had a lot of time on their hands to go through that process, right? And us being police officers, we were busy for 9 years, right? So we just now have the opportunity to do this, right? So, but anyway, I think we talked to some folks who were around back then, and we think the main thing was, at that time, it was a full entry requirement, which meant that whether you had 30 years on the fire department or police department, or 2 years or 2 days on the fire department, police department, there was going to be a vote of the membership, and if that vote passed, you had to roll into the FPPA pension. So if you had, $800,000 in your defined or in your 401k, you were now rolling into. And I'm really paraphrasing and doing that stuff. The great thing about this opportunity now is the only option now for us is what we call a partial entry. So ultimately what that comes down to is, should we decide to move forward with this, should you allow us to go forward with this, all current sworn employees of the police department will have a choice. They can stay with their existing pension plan in the ICMA, or they could go to one of the FPAPA plans that are offered. All future hires after we make this decision of a start date, should we decide to do so, all of those folks will go automatically into the FPPA plan. And at this point, we're talking about the defined benefit plan for those folks. There's a lot of different numbers and things like that. You may have questions, but at the end of the day, for me, this comes down to a recruitment and retention necessity. And there are a number of organizations, police departments in the metropolitan area and across the state that are moving and have already moved or are working toward moving toward the FPPA plan, the defined benefit plan specifically. Not that there's any volatility in the stock market, right? So interesting timing on this, like I almost planned it, but not so. So there's a lot of interest from organizations out there. And one of the things that I've talked to you about before is the difficulty we have with recruiting and retention when we're competing with so many agencies. And every agency in the metropolitan area is hiring, literally every agency is hiring a number of officers. And I put 5 academy recruits, made 5 job offers to academy recruits for this academy that started in January. And got 5 acceptances, and then a week before the academy, 2 separate people called me and told me they're going to other agencies. So, and that's not uncommon for us. I have to, when I make a job offer, it was different than when I did it in 1991, and I'm hanging on their legs saying, please let me in the door, please let me in the door, and they're face pushing me off. But now we have to sell our department to the 22 and 21-year-olds sitting across the table. Why are we better than Broomfield? Why are we better than Inglewood? Why are we better than this? And I'm like, well, geez, look at me, I'm the chief, for Christ's sake. That's why we're better. But ultimately, it comes down to, just like any other job, what can we do for them? What can we offer them? And I think that we've done a great job as a council and as a department, as a community, to do all the things we can do so far. We have great equipment. We have great training. We have incredible community support in Littleton, which those are amazing things, and the support is the most amazing thing from the council, from the community, but that's more amazing to someone in my position with 27 years on than it is to a 21-year-old kid with 5 job offers on the table. What does that translate to in cash? What does that translate to in benefits for them? So this is a big deal for us. And I think I'll cut off right there. There's a lot of information in here. You may have questions, and I'll turn it over to Tiffany, or if you guys have questions, let me have them, and we'll go through that.
I have a follow-up on the recruitment. And so does this make, is this an element, at least from a full compensation package, that puts you on par, or does this give you a little bit of an edge across the other jurisdictions you're competing with right now?
So I don't ultimately know where the other jurisdictions are going to end up. The FPPA pension, defined benefit pension, is very attractive for these agencies because it's so well funded. It's a very stable plan. So my speculation is that many agencies will go there. We've already seen Westminster, Thornton. Thornton's a problem, Westminster's a problem because they're both expanding. Thornton especially, they've got a council approval to hire 60 officers for the city the size of Thornton. That's huge. So they've already gone, they're already re-entered. And so my concern is that if we don't go, we're going to be behind. And if we do go, we will be able to compete more effectively. I think we'll probably be on a more equal playing field, but without it, I think we're at a distinct disadvantage.
What's the differences between the ICMA and the FPPA plans?
So do you want me to answer? Do you want to answer?
I can answer it.
Go for it.
So ICMA is a defined contribution plan, and so participants can manage their funds. We have a set of funds that they can utilize, but they manage it, self-managed. FPPA has 3 plans, I believe, available. One is a defined contribution, which is similar to an ICMA. One is a hybrid plan, so partially defined benefit, partially defined contribution, and then a full defined benefit plan. So in a full defined benefit plan, your funds are managed for you. You don't manage them.
And the payout is for the rest of your life versus the defined contribution is when you run out of money in that plan.
Right, that is the difference. You have a defined salary equivalent payment once you retire as a defined benefit, whereas in a defined contribution, whatever you have invested in, whatever earnings you have made, that's all you have once you retire.
And they don't get Social Security if they had accrued. They don't get that too, or do they?
So police is exempt from Social Security as well as the fire department.
If they had it from
Previous job?
They still qualify.
we wouldn't. It doesn't take away what they might be eligible.
No, if they had a previous job before joining before City of Littleton, and they've put into Social Security, they would still have those benefits for what they put in.
So, I'm trying to, it doesn't affect my thoughts on this, but I think in the para system, you can't get both, I think.
Well,
Correct. That's,
is there something, there's
So,
do you want to help?
if I can speak, there is an offset to Social Security benefits. So if you had credits in the Social Security system for a period of years, once you do go to take your retirement, those offset by whatever your dollar amount that you're going to take out of your fund is, right? So most people who have a fairly good 401k, who we're talking if we're 20, 25, 30 years in, or a defined benefit plan for 25, 30 years, those credits are going to be very small, and the offset does affect what you get from what you pay.
Tiffany, I might ask that you describe for council kind of the difference between a defined contribution versus a defined benefit and the risk to the city. I mean, what does that mean as we kind of look at our budgets in the future? And specifically, you might talk about FPPA and its kind of financial stability versus other kinds of programs that others have been kind of talking about across the country. So I want council to kind of hear a broader view of that kind of those two concepts.
All right, so currently for the ICMA plan, the city directs the amount of match that is put into the plan currently, so you have the decision to do that. Currently, it's a required 5% match for employees and a 7% match for the city, and that's your decision. You can change that as council. Whereas with the FPPA plan, there is a board, and the board is actually the one who defines what the contribution rates are through a number of formulas. So one of the disadvantages of FPPA is that you don't have control over any future contribution rates. But I do think that the plan is one of the more well-funded plans across probably even the United States in comparison to the para plan. Para has seen a significant decline in their funding, but FPPA, I think, has done a really good job in estimating what interest earnings are and their plan assets to make sure that they hold that funding. It went down a little bit, but it's definitely much more well-funded than the para plan currently is.
Well, I think being on para and having gotten shafted, the difference was how much you had to pay if you were buying service credit. And so it was like really inexpensive to buy service credit. And then people buy it, they retire, and it hasn't been earning that long-term value in there. I like this.
Can I touch on that too with the FPPA? The difference between that and para is, I don't know if you guys will agree with me over here, but the service credits for the FPPA pension are extraordinarily expensive. So, and they're prorated based on your age and how long you have in. So, which I just want to address a little bit. There's a little bit of an exigency in this for us and our members because we're getting older every day. So, and those service credits cost more the older you get, the higher your salary, the closer you are to retirement. So, that's one of the things that Peggy brings up, that if the service credits were cheap, be a lot easier decision for the folks that have 20 years on. What are you going to do? Are you going to go to defined benefit? Are you going to stay with ICMA, or what are we going to do? So they are more expensive. They get more expensive the closer you are to retirement.
Karen, and then Jerry.
Could you clarify what it is we're being asked to consider? It's a discussion, I saw that. Are we being asked to opinionate or direct on anything in particular, or are we just talking this over?
Yeah, council would be asked to we would direct staff to move forward with the steps to transition to the FPPA or do nothing.
And then we got this on our dais about Tabor. Is there a decision to be made about that?
And that's a privileged document from the city attorney, which is in relation to this.
And are we doing anything with this?
Mayor, Council, no. This was just information regarding a particular legal question that existed regarding this, just for your background information. It has nothing to do with the decision you're being asked. In essence, what you're discussing tonight is whether the staff should proceed with going forth and getting the necessary materials, documents to bring this back as formal agenda items. And that's what you're discussing tonight. If you were to say no, then we would not. If you say yes, you're not acting tonight, you're just giving staff that direction.
Nothing to do with this?
That's only background information from a legal standpoint in helping you make this decision about direction.
Okay, Jerry.
Well, I haven't read the additional information we just received yet.
When did the fire guys go to this? I think they went through the process in 2008, and they implemented 2009.
And that went to the people for a vote, did it not?
Well,
and if so, with that in mind, then how is this different?
Yeah, what went to the people, let's sort of talk about that. There was a discussion to bring the firefighters into FPPA under the rules FPPA had at that time. Because pension contribution would appear to be a long-term obligation under the Taxpayer Bill of Rights, the city placed on the ballot a general item authorizing the city to incur a long-term obligation to FPPA pursuant to the Taxpayer Bill of Rights. That ballot item that went on the ballot did not reference fire. It just referenced incurring a long-term obligation to the FPPA. Now, the city, when it subsequently, after the voters approved that, adopted its joint resolutions and agreements, those were only limited to fire. So the issue now is whether the city should then consider going to have more joint agreements and resolutions to do a similar thing, but somewhat different with police because it's a different plan now than it was in 2008, and that's what you're discussing tonight. But the ballot resolution is, without going into all of the privilege information in my memo, the factual public record ballot resolution was simply to authorize incurring a long-term obligation in the FPPA. It did not reference a particular group of employees.
So what is the difference between, we went to the voters then, but not this time?
Well, you went to the voters because you were making the initial decision to incur a long-term obligation in the FPPA. Now, council could certainly decide to refer something to the voters again, but the answer is that decision that you made back in 2008 was just to authorize the incurrence of a general long-term obligation to FPPA pursuant to the Taxpayer Bill of Rights. It was not specific for any one group of employees. So the issue that I think you're now having this study session is, do you want to go back and seek the vote? You could certainly seek the voters' input again, but the resolution itself, that the actual ballot item the voters approved, was just a general authorization. It was not specific to any group of employees. So because it's a general authorization, the voters have authorized the long-term obligations in the FPPA.
What we voted on did not say fire.
It did not say fire at all.
I just don't recall what it is.
The difference was, you only were talking about fire when you adopted the resolutions after the voters voted on it. That's all you talked about.
The council did.
The council did.
That wasn't part of the ballot
That
question.
wasn't part of the ballot. The ballot was a broad resolution authorizing. Now, had you not adopted the ballot, you couldn't have done the subsequent. You couldn't have adopted the joint resolutions and the agreements. But the ballot was a ballot that simply authorized the incurrence of a long-term obligation to FPPA.
Thank you.
And then regarding fire, so it's my understanding this would not be enacted. This, if we decided to move ahead with this, it wouldn't happen until 2019. Would it be? And then at that point, we would no longer be based on the South Metro, what happens with the fire department, we would no longer have the fire department with this obligation. So it's
Correct.
It would just carry over. There would be no. It wouldn't be.
And I don't know how many members of the fire, I guess all the members of the fire department are on, I don't know, 140 some members or something like that. 151, since they only work 3 days a month, that translates to like 17 people. But, so you go from 151, and if every eligible, fully staffed police officer were on there, it would be 80. So
it would actually be fewer.
So on the start date you were asking, that's going to be established jointly between the council and finance and FPPA, what they can do. They say in about a 9-month window from the time we come to you with a non-binding resolution, which is the first formal step. From that date, and that resolution would have a tentative start date on it. But if you're projecting 9 months forward, if we come to you even in March, which we'd like to do as soon as possible, you're looking at January probably. But keeping in mind, for our members, the sooner the better for us on purchasing those service credits at the end of the day.
Rena?
I don't know if I completely followed the discussion on fires, so this is a question for Tiffany maybe. If fire moves out of Littleton, does the obligation, the FPPA obligation now sit with the new district? Or do we, as Littleton, still have an obligation to those firefighters?
It would follow the employee, so wherever the employee
is, that's the employer has the obligation.
Right.
Okay.
And South Metro has FPPA, so this transfer is pretty seamless. At least that's what's anticipated.
And do you have a sense of how many of your current officers would want to opt in? Do you think that's a majority, or?
So Tiffany did a great job on doing a little bit of research on Westminster. Is it good? Thornton, was it Thornton? So Thornton, like I said, Westminster and Thornton just recently went over. They're going through the process. And Thornton, I think, had approximately 70% of their eligible personnel did it. Ultimately, it comes down to the end of the day, if you have X number of dollars in your 401k and you have 5 years left, does it make financial sense for you to take all of that money? Can you afford to buy, let's say you're a 25-year veteran, can you afford to buy 25 years in the defined benefit plan? And maybe you can only buy 20, maybe you can buy 25. But it's an independent decision that each one will have, and there's a series of meetings they'll have with the FPPA in that 9-month window to lay out all those numbers for everybody so they can make the best informed decision for them. I anticipate our numbers would be similar to the other agencies in approximately 70%.
Would the financial impact on the city depend on how many officers switched?
Well, not necessarily. So the financial impact to the city is there's an additional 2% that's required to be funded. Now, we would have to decide, will that be funded by the employee or will that be funded by the city? So currently, the city funds 10% in the police pension, and the employee pays 10% as well. In order to do the partial reentry into FPPA, there's a 22% combined required contribution rate. So that means we're 2% below what we are today. So depending on if the city were to decide and amend the budget or include it in the 2019 budget to fund that additional 2%, That cost, if all police officers were to join, it would be about $133,000 to the city for that 2%.
Oh, one time?
Annually.
It is.
Annually. It would be annually.
That number goes up to total combined at 24% over the next 4 years.
Right. There was a vote through the FPPA membership to increase the employees portion for, I believe it was 4 or 5 years. Is that right?
Yeah. It's going up 0.5% per year until 2022.
2022. Yeah.
And that's the employers, or the employees' percentage goes up 0.5% a year every year until 2022.
So the cost to the city would be the $133,000 if all participants were to transfer.
And the city paid that 2%.
Right.
We could decide, employees could do it, could it be 1 and 1? Would that be an option? Is there?
Potentially.
Do you have a question? How much are we paying on fire?
Fire, when they opted in, it was a full entry and it was 10 and 10. And so when they transferred, it was 10 and 10. But currently, because of the 0.5% that's been increased over the last few years, the city's doing 10% and then the employees doing 11.5%. I can't remember where we are.
Starting January 1, 2018, they're at 12.
12,
so
okay,
10,
so it's
10
off
to
half.
12.
So that's that 22%.
Yeah, the 22%. Yeah. And then the other thing that to note is that there is a potential savings in the future for new hires because new hires, the city's match is only 8%, not 10. So there is a little bit of savings that could be had in the next for future hires for the city side. So depending on how many officers we hire over the next few years.
If, as we bring this forward, will you be doing a full financial analysis of kind of the long-term obligation? Would we be able to see some sort of a pro forma of the incremental financial impact there would be on the city?
I could do that.
What bucket does that money come out of right now?
General fund. Yes.
Yeah.
So I guess if we're paying 10% of fire right now, and how much is that? What's the dollar amount?
For fire? Oh gosh, I don't know that number.
So we would what I'm getting at is, would we save money? Would the police cost less than the fire from our pocket?
Yeah, it's not saving, it's spending less.
Spending less, yeah. We would be.
Yeah, well, we counted that in our future costs for the fire department already. So
But they work 8 days a week instead of 7.
That's right.
Someone drives fast.
They have lights and sirens they get to.
Until just recently, you were all cops.
right there, with no pension.
We aren't getting paid.
We shouldn't have cut you off
Opted.
until after.
Exactly.
It's all about timing, Chief.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, council, any additional questions? Okay. Is there any objection to asking staff to move ahead with bringing this back to council for more formal action?
No issue.
No objection.
But we are going to get more information though. Is that what I heard you say, Tiff?
Yes, I can do, I'll do a future financial impact based on what we estimate salary increases to be over the next 5 years.
And also with the fire guys, you know, what the difference is errors, potential reductions in costs and stuff.
Net impact to the budget.
Before we wrap this up, I have a solution to Councilwoman Fay's issue with the overdue books and the animals. So I was just thinking that, so if we get one of those mangy coyotes shows up in your yard, why don't we pin like an overdue book thing on them and put them in jail in Arapahoe County?
we changed that.
It's too late. It's an option. I'm just throwing it out there. It's too late.
It's creative thinking.
Out of the box.
Put it back in the
That's
box.
what I had for on Saturday.
Yes, you did. Well, asking you shall receive. All right, before it gets worse, there's no other business this evening, so we'll adjourn. Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Katie.